was taking place between Syria and Egypt, and Israel was caught in the middle. The land that they were fighting over, the region that they were fighting over, referred to as Soul Syria, included Israel. Go ahead, included Palestine, included Tyre, Sidon, included Joppa, all those places. Go ahead.
And he shall continue more years than the king of the north.
When it says he shall continue more years than the king of the north, let's go to the little thing here. The king of the south, those two respective kings, it says he will continue more years than the king of the north. The king of the south literally ruled and lived up until 221 BC. Whereas they both started ruling in the same year, as you can see, 246 BC. But in their kingship, in their rulership, Ptolemy III reigned 4 years longer than Seleucus II. He died in 225 BC, which if you know on the BC side, it comes up before 221 BC. Read that verse again, but he shall what?
Verse 9. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return to his own land.
Yeah, was that, you repeating it?
Yeah.
Go ahead and read it. Read it again. Yeah, read it.
I'll do verse 8. And shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold. Okay?
And he shall continue more years
than the king of the south.
And he shall continue more years, go ahead, than the king of the north. The king of the south reigned about 4 years longer than the king of the north. Alright? Where we at now? We're going to verse 9?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Verse 9. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land.
In other words, he returns back into Egypt. Go ahead.
Verse 10. But his sons shall be stirred up and shall assemble a multitude of great forces.
Now this is cold right here. When it says his son shall stand up, the son that, I want you to read it from verse 8 again, okay?
Okay.
Go ahead. Because you just read verse 9.
Yeah.
So read it from verse 8 again.
Verse 8. And shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods.
Talking about the king of the south, the third total. Continue.
With their princes and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold.
Okay, continue.
And he shall continue more years than the king of the north.
And we already saw those years. Go ahead and let me say this. That was concluding the episode known as the Third Syrian War, which was also called the Laodicean War. Alright? Go ahead.
Verse 9. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land.
Go ahead.
Verse 10. But his sons shall be stirred up and shall assemble a multitude of great forces. And one shall serve.
Now when he said his son, we're talking about enter Ptolemy IV, whose surname was Philopator. Ptolemy IV, Philopator, succeeds his father Ptolemy III and continues the aggression. Alright, go ahead.
And overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up.
Continue. What verse you at?
Verse 10.
Go ahead.
Even to his fortress. Verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler.
Choler. I'm talking about anger or wrath, but I'll say it too. Go ahead.
And shall come forth and fight with him.
Now when we say the king of the south, by now, during the time of Philopator, once Ptolemy the fourth comes in, the Seleucid line, the successor of Seleucus II, was Antiochus Megas, who was more commonly known as Antiochus the Great. That's how you say great, the great in Greek, Antiochus Megas. Now this is bad because when you read the history on Antiochus Megas or Antiochus the Great, he was really about pleasure and debauchery. But all these verses that deal from verses 11 all the way down to verse 19, which include the 4th and the 5th Syrian wars, those battles on his behalf, because this is the very same Antiochus that fought the Romans back during the time the Rome was a republic and they were governed by the Senate. So what happened was, you heard of I'm sure everyone has heard of the Carthaginian king or ruler, Wants to count. Hannah. Hannah, the one who actually got us, really put the, had between 3 Punic wars for a while, contended successfully with the Romans. Well, when the Romans finally defeated them, this, Hannibal literally fled to the kingdom of Antiochus the Great and became the top general of his army. So the strife that you read about between the kingdom of the south and the king of the north, on behalf of the king of the north, the battles are being fought by Hannibal. But you're not going to get that in the Bible. You're not going to get that in Josephus. You're not going to get that in Apocalyptic. You got to do your historical research. That's just an interesting footnote to add in there. Because he was one of he was the source behind the victories that Antiochus had. Antiochus the Great. So what verse was that you just read?
Verse 11.
Go ahead and read it again.
And the king of the south shall be moved with choler.
Yeah.
With choler. And shall come forth.
It's pronounced choler or choler. And it means anger or wrath. Go ahead.
And shall come forth and fight with him. Even the king of the north.
In other words, Ptolemy IV started fighting with Antiochus III. Antiochus the Great. Go ahead.
And he shall set forth a great multitude. But the multitude shall be given into his hand.
In other words, the king of the north met with a great multitude, but he lost. So this is where Antiochus met a defeat. In the Fourth Syrian War, particularly the ultimate battle was the Battle of Raphis, the Battle of Raphia. Now the funny thing about the Battle of Raphia is it's like you gotta have a knowledge of what was taking place. Because concerning these battles, this battle, the Battle of Raphia, had been the biggest battle that had taken place since 301 BC, when the final battle took place between those generals of Alexander to establish whose kingdom would be who. In other words, when the Bible says that the kingdom was broken up into 4 parts, a succession or a series of battles broke out between those generals that was called the Diadochi. The significant thing about the Battle of Raphia, or the Fourth Syrian War, was that this was the biggest battle since 301 BC, the Battle of Ipsus. Got to research, alright? Read that again, brother.
Verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him. Even the king of the north.
King of the north, go ahead.
And he shall set forth a great multitude.
And the king of the north shall set forth a great multitude. In other words, the king of the north met him with a big battle. The king of the north, Antiochus, met Ptolemy IV with a big army. Go ahead.
But the multitude shall be given into his hand.
Now, he lost. But in a sense, when you read the scriptures, well, go ahead. Watch this. Go ahead.
Verse 12. And when he had taken away the multitude,
when Ptolemy IV would have taken away the multitude of Antiochus III, go ahead.
His heart shall be lifted up.
Continue.
And he shall cast down many 10,000.
And that's what he did. Go ahead.
But he shall not be strengthened by it.
When it says he shall not be strengthened by it, the fact that Ptolemy IV defeated Antiochus in this first battle between the two of them was the fact that he exhausted and weakened his empire because of the cost of the battle and all the soldiers and men that cost him also. That's why I say he wouldn't be strengthened by it. So when you read the scriptures, in other words, Antiochus literally another battle he fought Egypt and he won. But we'll get to that. The verse is going to tell you that. Go ahead.
Verse 12. And when he had taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it.
Now that's what verse 12. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 13.
Now that verse 12 was talking about the Battle of Raphia. Alright? That's what verse 12 is talking about. This dynamic took place between 219 and 217 BC. 219 BC through 217 BC. This was like a 2-year campaign that climaxed in and finalized in 217 BC. Go ahead.
Verse 13. For the king of the north shall return and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former.
Now, let me say this. Here's the circumstance behind that. Read that verse again.
Verse 13.